Hey amazing creators! If you're looking for ways of adding texture to your art journal pages, your mixed media projects or your art painting projects, then I've got some great tips for you today. Plus, I'm sharing some great techniques for getting the most out of your colouring materials. So stay with me to the end of the video as I share each stage of this art journal page. And if you're new to my channel, then do subscribe to get your weekly fix of creative tips, techniques and inspiration. And if you're already one of my subscribers, then a massive hello! It is so good to be here again with you this week and sharing some more creativity with you. Because you guys know that that's what I love doing. But whilst you're here, I'd love to hear what you love to do. So let me know in the comments below, what are your favourite art and craft projects at the moment? And if there's anything that you want me to cover in my videos. Because if I can, I will. So to get the texture that I want in today's project on my page, I'm going to start with some gesso, and here's a great technique. Try tinting your gesso with gelatos. So a really simple way to do it is to just scribble the gelato on a piece of plastic and then mix the gesso into it. Now the gesso I'm using is quite a thick gesso. It's kind of more like a paste than a liquid, particularly as I'm now at the end of my pot, so I think that some of the fluidity has gone. But that's perfect because it's just what I need for this project. Oh, and by the way, don't forget that all the products I've used will be listed below in the descriptions section. So if you've only got the very fluid gesso, then it might be a good idea to use a light modelling paste instead. Because the texture that I'm going to lay down first is that lovely branching texture you get from thicker acrylic paint or thick gesso when you squish it together. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So I'm covering two opposite pages in my junk journal with this gelato tinted gesso, and the first layer was just for coverage, but now I'm just going to add a little bit more thickness in some areas so that when I close the book and press the pages together and then immediately open it up again, you get that lovely branch texture. And as I work through the stages of this page, I'm going to show you how to really harness that lovely texture that you've put down in that very first layer. Let that gessoed layer dry completely before you move on. So you might spot that I had a bit of difficulty with my camera at this section, so I'm sorry about it going in and out of focus. It will settle down for the rest of the film. For my next layer, I've purposely picked a colour that is much darker than the first layer and also contrasts with it quite nicely. I'm using a plastic spreader to just spread the paint over that whole page, and then I'm using the spreader to then scrape back paint from the raised areas of the texture. So we're letting that texture really work for us and showing it off to its best. I decided that I wanted to have a focal point on this journal page, and it was kind of reminding me a bit of denim, and I quite like the contrast of heavy denim with something light like a lace. So I decided to add a die cut, and the die cut I'm using is the doily circle because I really like the contemporary but lacy design of it. I already have it cut from some craft foam for another project that I did recently, so I'm just using that craft foam to give me an idea of the placement on the page. I'm just going to roughly block out that area with some gesso and some tinted gesso and also some water as well just to soften it, and then I'm going to build that area up into layers until I'm happy with the way it looks. That area is now nicely blocked out, and it's going to mean that the focal point will really pop, but you've also noticed that I'm using a little bit of dry brushing over the textured area just to make it highlight a little bit more, and the gesso will bring that texture out If I was using white, it might make it a bit too stark and a bit too contrasting, whereas the gesso is a nice soft highlight and blends well with that gessoed block area. Next up, I just want to prepare my die cut, and I'm just using another page in one of my junk journals. Now, I use several junk journals. I have quite a few on the go at the same time, and if you want to know more about my junk journals, I do have links to my video that has a whole walkthrough all about them. So do check that out in the cards or in the description below. Once the paint is completely dry on that page, I can then go ahead and die cut it. And my cutting plates are a little old, so I am having to pass this paper through a few times just to make sure that I really do get a clean cut. But the byproduct of doing that and using such a thin paper is that the die cut is very firmly still in the die. So it's a case of gently teasing out the die cut from the die using a piercing tool. And you want to work around slowly with the piercing tool because you don't want to break or tear any of the die cut. But once it's out, you can go ahead and stick it down to that blocked out area. Just make sure that the area is completely dry before you do. And again, I've let the area dry completely, and now I'm going to go for a little bit of gold sparkle, and I'm using the Holbein Artist Gouache paint, Brilliant Gold. Now this paint really does sparkle. I kind of find that metallic paints, they're always a little bit disappointing because they just do not have the sheen that you're kind of hoping for, whereas this paint, it really does. Now it's not a smooth paint, it has a bit of a texture to it, and you might find that it's a few extra pennies than you're used to spending on paint. But if you're looking for a gold paint, it really is worth it. But I'd love to hear if you've got any suggestions for gold paints, because I'm always looking for new products to try out. So if you've got a gold paint that you love at the moment that has that sheen, that metallic sheen and that sparkle, then let me know in the comments below. So again, I'm using a dry brush technique to get it onto the page, but you might have noticed that on that right hand page, where I'm kind of working that up into a journal, page 2. So I'm utilising any of the textures that I've left over on that page whilst working on my left hand page. So from cleaning off tools, or for when I added the gel medium onto the back of the die cut, and then using it as a palette for my dry brushing and adding of colour. I probably won't finish that page today, but it will be there for when I next feel like working on it. This final layer of dry brushing has added to the texture that we put on that first layer right at the start, and it's made it really pop. So I was looking around for ways to finish this page when I remembered a book I bought last year called Snipped Tales by Julie Kirk. Now I've followed Julie Kirk's blog Notes on Paper for many years now, and I love the way she writes and her storytelling. And her book is just a wonderful collection of collage stories, and it's definitely inspired me to finish this journal page with an abstract collage story of my own. So do go and say hello to Julie, and I'll leave a link to her blog below as well as a link to her book as well. So I've rifled through an old book that I saved from a 50p bin in my local charity shop, looking for various words and phrases that I think would make a good story. I'm actually just letting my heart rule, and words that sort of pop out to me, they're the ones I'm picking. And then I'm putting them together into quite an abstract miniature story, which you'll be able to read more clearly at the end of the video. And I decided that I would just glue them in place with a little bit of that tinted gesso, and this will help them both to stick to the page as well as to harmonise with the whole theme. So that was this art journal page. I hope you enjoyed it. It is full of texture, and you can see where I've made sure that that texture just shines through from that very first layer all the way to the end. And I hope you found the tips and tricks that I shared with you today really helpful and useful for your next project. Do let me know how you get on with it, and feel free to share any photos of any projects that you do with me. You can just tag me on social media, and you can find all my social media links below. I'll be back again next week with some more tips, tricks and techniques and inspiration for your art and craft projects. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.